Hello, BookTube. I am part of a BookTube event in September called Amour, which was created by the Bookish Bryants, and they assembled a great team of co-hosts. And for some mysterious reason, I am still on that team, even though I misidentified when and what Autumn Amour was. I made a whole video about how it was August Amour, and I went on and on about it, and that's not true. If I'm going to be a co-host in some of these events, you'd think I'd take the time to learn about them. No, Autumn Amour is in September. The Bookish Bryants just did their own lavish TBR and announcement video for it. If I remember, I'll leave a link down below, and I'll try to link to all of the co-hosts down below. And it is the latest iteration in a string of genre events that the Bookish Bryants have come up with, where you spend a month celebrating a certain genre. And in September, we're doing romance. And we have, once again, categories. I've jotted them down on the tablet here. Prompts, just in case you need them. Keep in mind, the Bookish Bryants are not doctrinaire about this, nor are any of the co-hosts. You can, as long as you're reading a romance in September, you're on board with Autumn Amour. But if you want prompts, we have a bunch of fun ones. Week 1 being either a historical romance or a contemporary romance. Because as Sarah at the Bookish Knitter and I have pointed out forever, romance is an enormous umbrella. It covers everything. Anything that you like to read fits under that umbrella. It's just, is there a love story that takes prominence in the plot? If there is, if the love story takes prominence or even governs and drives the plot, then it is a romance novel, whether it has lasers or petticoats. So you have a choice in week 1, historical or contemporary. Then week 2 is sweet or spicy. Because one element of a love story is physical attraction. And not to be too reductive here, but it's the 21st century, and we're largely, thanks to Twitter and TikTok, we're largely raising alien pod people who don't know anything about the basics of even being alive. So I might need to stress that for any viewers who don't know it, is that an element here is physical attraction. And romance novels have typically taken 2 different directions with that. They can either be sweet in the sense that you don't get any X-rated scenes. You don't get any actual pornography. That is implied to take place after the book is over, but you don't get any of that described for you, and none of it is explicit. Or spicy, where the whole point of it is that you're getting that's a big element of the plot. Again, each can be done either well or poorly. The fact that an author decides to include all sorts of spicy elements in their book does not automatically mean that it's garbage or that it's a bad romance. It's just 2 different ways of going about it. Then week 3 is the haves or the have-nots. Because in a large number of romances, money is a very active factor. You wouldn't think that would be true, but it's very seldom. It's more common now than it ever has been, but traditionally in the last, since Jane Austen, romances are fueled by the economic disparity between the one and the other. Usually the man has money and property, and the woman either doesn't or doesn't have enough of it, or had it and lost it. Something like that. Usually money is a big deal. Again, in the 21st century, that's not so much always true. Often in 21st century romances, especially 21st century contemporary romances, the 2 people will have jobs and maybe commercial dreams, entrepreneurial dreams, but it won't usually be anymore. It's not just a de facto rule anymore that one of them will be a count or a duke or something like that, although you still get plenty of those. So that's week 2, is where do these characters stand in the world? And week 4 is traditionally published versus independently published. Because once upon a time, Elora's Cave and whatnot notwithstanding, once upon a time, there wasn't much in the way of independently published romance. You either went traditional or you wrote it on your own and circulated it amongst your friends. Now, thanks to self-publishing, the number of independently published romances has skyrocketed. It has grown by a quintillion, by subscripted 10 zeros. Now anyone can write a romance, get an ISBN for it, and have it in the Amazon Marketplace. You put a nice, nifty cover on it, a good interesting description, say it's book 1 in an open-ended series, offer it free for a week or 2 weeks. Offer, if you've written 10 books, offer a package deal on them. You can build yourself a side career, a trickle of money, definitely, by doing that. It's sometimes not a trickle. And I don't know the exact numbers off the top of my head. I don't have them at my fingertips, but I'd be willing to bet that 90% of self-published books are romance novels. So there's plenty to pick from. So, and again, the week 4 is traditionally published or independently published, but that doesn't say anything about whether or not it's sweet or spicy, whether or not it's money-driven, whether or not it's historical or contemporary. See what I mean? There's a huge amount of flexibility in any of these. You could do, I mean, if you want, you could do self-published for every one of these categories, obviously. And the Bookish Bryants video, their sort of TBR, inspired me to make one of my own. I did one already for what I thought was August Amour. But it's actually September, and the point that I made with my August Amour TBR is true in September too, which is that I read a lot. And the shape of the reading that I have determined for myself is new releases in the American book market, in the 15 or 16 genres that interest me for that year. I do a lot of other reading. I obviously shop for secondhand and older books at the Bartel bookshop. I also reread relatively newer releases, things from a couple of years ago or a year ago, if they come out in paperback or something like that. But the bulk, the enormous majority of what I read is new releases for any given month. Not just in romance, but in a lot of other categories as well. So my TBR for Autumn Amour will be largely drawn from the romances coming out that month. And I have a bunch of them that I want to show you, because you're going to see that they easily meet a lot of the prompts. And a lot, I think, I didn't actually do a head count, but a lot of the choices that came to mind for September, I'll probably read a lot more than these, but these I'll definitely read. A lot of the choices that came to mind for September are independently published. There's a lot of romances you can get that way. Like, for instance, I don't know about this first one. It could be or not. I didn't keep exclusive track of which was which. But this is by Isla Olsen. She's designated on her cover as a USA Today best-selling author, but I don't think I've ever read her. I don't think I've heard her name before now. But with a title like this, how could I resist? The title of her book is "And the Best Man Ran Away with the Groom." I am definitely going to read a book with that title. I'm curious to know right away. We'll see. It's obviously a contemporary romance, but we'll see. Then this next one, Sarah and I will be doing some video conferences between us for the month of September. Don't you worry. But one point that she has made on her own channel endless times is, I'll link all of my co-hosts down below. But one point that she's made, and I've noticed it too, is that category romances tend to be looked down upon even by romance readers who are looked down upon themselves by everybody else. The category romances, things like Harlequin romances, that have a format, they have a formula, they have a set price, they come out, 10, 15 of them a month. You can't break new conceptual ground with them. You are not allowed to do that. You know what your brief is if you're writing a Harlequin intrigue or a Harlequin paranormal or a Harlequin historical. You know what your brief is. So you're going to play by the rules. It's apparently a very welcoming authorial environment. But even so, it's largely welcoming, I would imagine, because the authors know ahead of time what they're getting into. No author is going to submit a 1,000-page historical novel to Harlequin historicals, obviously. They're just not going to do that. And I want to include some category romances for September. So I picked this one. This is by Ellie James. I'm pretty sure that I have read her. This is called Cowboy Justice at Whiskey Gulch. It's a Harlequin intrigue with a sexy cowboy on a horseback with a do-do-do-do-do. on book covers, as in real life, the focus of my attention immediately shifts if there's an adorable dog within view. And it happened this one too. So I imagine it's going to have a courageous dog in it. It's a contemporary cowboy romance. Then this next one is it's a Christmas romance. It's a little bit strange. The appurtenances of a Christmas romance, I imagine, will live for a long time, even though those appurtenances have largely died in the real world. Boston, for instance, hasn't had snow for Christmas in probably 175 years, and it's never going to have snow for Christmas again. So, dragging a sled through snowfields and whatnot, that's something that it's going to look increasingly weird in an increasingly large amount of the world. But it'll live forever in romances because it's so wonderful. And this is by a big-name author that I don't know well enough. There are a lot of big-name authors in the romance genre. A lot of them I've read and I know, but Janet Daly is one that I have not. Somebody Like Santa. See what I mean? That cover is not going to happen at all in the winter of 2022, 2023. But this is a fantasy. These are fiction. And this is a contemporary romance. Again, it looks like we have another cowboy. And it's a Christmas romance, which is a kind of cozy all by itself. And it's by Janet Daly, who I don't know well enough. So I'll give that a chance. Then romance, BookTube, is the same as all other genres in that sometimes there's just such a thing as a cover by. I yield to that as much as the next person. Despite all of the obvious biochemical evidence to the contrary, I'm only human. So when I saw this next book, it's part of the Perdition Club, which I think we've seen on this channel before. I think we saw it for my mistaken August Amour video. But this is by Victoria Vale. Not the same Vicky Vale as you comic book fans will know, I'm assuming. And it is called A Dangerous Game. And it's a cover by. And again, as with the title of the Best Man Ran Away with the Groom, I want to know the story behind this right away. I'm intrigued right away. So I'll be giving this a try in September. This next one is by Vanessa Kelly. I know this author and like her. But I admit this is also partially a cover by because there's one particular factor on a romance cover that will do it every time, and that factor is Paul Merritt. This is the Highlanders' Holiday Wife. And there is himself. This is the Highlanders' Holiday Wife, but this is also a winter release. Snow everywhere, people bundled up. Last winter, the winter before that, the winter before that, and the winter before that in Boston. On the week of Christmas week, people were walking around in shorts and t-shirts. But once upon a time, winter didn't behave like that, and this is kind of intriguing in that there's no tartan, there's no plaid, there's no outward Highlander trappings here. So we'll see. Then this next one, oh my, we're going to have to talk about this during the course of Autumn Amour, and that is the Omegaverse. Now, I will devote a whole video, maybe more than one, to the Omegaverse. You can look it up. You can Google it. It's a whole subgenre of romance in which, among other things, men are broken down into categories, alpha, omega, and whatnot, and some of them can get pregnant. There's all sorts of Freudian heydays that you could have with the Omegaverse, but the books can be a lot of fun. And I'm definitely not going to do a TBR for a romance-related month without having an Omegaverse novel there. I'll probably read a lot more than one. This is the first book in a series called Bangers and Mash. And it is called How to Train Your Alpha by Mary Farmer, writing as M.M. Farmer. How to Train Your Alpha. The alphas are the top dogs in the Omegaverse. They are men who are automatically more alluring, they are stronger, they are taller, they are more handsome, they are hotter. And they're usually the ones who knock up the Omegas. And so maybe we have a cheeky Omega here who's trying to get the psychological upper hand on his alpha. We shall see. I shall see. You probably won't. This next one is the first book in a series. When it goes for self-published romance novels, science fiction novels, mystery novels, I look for first books in series. I like that feeling, getting in on the ground floor, seeing if the author's doing something I really like. And I don't know anything about this except that it's romance science fiction. This is called Hunting Cat by Piper Drake. Fairly stylish cover, apart from the automatic allure. This is the story, if I remember correctly, of a space marine of some kind who's looking to retire and sort of a renegade bounty hunter who can look human but isn't actually human. And when trouble comes to find him, he learns her true nature. but it's too late because love is already blossoming, and so we'll see. It sounds like a neat adventure. Usually the disappointment that I have with romance science fiction is that it stints on one of the founding pillars of science fiction, which is world building. Science fiction romances tend to be very weak on world building. Alien cultures are not explored. Faster Than Light Drive is not explored or individuated from other Faster Than Light Drives. It's some sort of appropriated wholesale from other science fiction novels so that the author can get on with the romance. I view that as an abrogation of the author's responsibility. I don't like that. I much prefer science fiction romances that don't do that. We'll see. Like I said, I don't know anything about this author. This is the first book in a series, so I'll give it a try. We'll see. This next one, it's by Cynthia Eden. I don't think I've ever read this author. I believe this is self-published. And it delves into another sort of plot strand that can run through a lot of self-published romance novels. It's not in the Omegaverse, don't worry. But one strand that runs through is when the male main character is an a-hole. Not that he seems like an a-hole to the outside world, but he really has a heart of gold, but that he actually is an a-hole, and somehow still becomes the target of slavish affection from the female main character, and is sometimes changed at the end. Even though, as I've said many times on this channel, I will repeat again for the cheap seats in the back, a-holes never change. Nothing changes them. That's what makes them an a-hole. But it's fantasy. Like I said, it's fiction, so anything can happen. This is called Ice Cold Saint. Can two villains fall in love? So is she going to be an a-hole too? I don't know. The only romance novels that I am ever tempted to DNF, which is booktube slang for did not finish, to just abruptly and intentionally stop reading a book. Don't say, it's not doing it for me, I'll come back to it some other time and say, no, I don't want to finish this. I'm not involved in any way, I'm abandoning this book. The only romance subgenre that I tend to want to DNF, I usually don't do it anyway, are a-hole romances. Because I have dealt with a-holes a lot in the real world, and there's no upside to them. And they don't ever change. There's no way to form a friendship with them or a relationship with them. There's no way to work with them. That's just fundamentally impossible to do. Any of you who've spent time in retail will probably be nodding your heads right now. Yes, we probably met the same a-holes. But I'll give it a try. Anyway, the next one, oh, good. Oh, no, okay. I said the only subgenre of romance that I tend to want to DNF is a-hole romances, but that's not true. This next one is an example of one other kind that I often want to DNF. I don't think I've ever done it, but I do not understand it. And I'm going to take Amour as a chance to maybe understand it better, and that is Amish romance. I've said before that I think one of the main reasons why people can get into Amish romances is because they've never actually met the Amish. I have met the Amish in Pennsylvania and for a long time in great detail in Iowa. And there's nothing romantic about their world. I understand why you would prize it out of reality and sort of make it this fairy tale pre-modernity world where romance can blossom, but it isn't like that at all in reality. But we shall see. We shall see. This is an Amish romance by the look of it. This is by Samantha Price, who I think has one of those booming side gigs as an Amish romance author. Sarah would know better. Sarah and I will have to talk about Amish romances. This is called Love and Cherish. One of the appeals of Amish romances is that they are always sweet. They are never spicy. Or usually not spicy. And another appeal is that the modern world is sort of kept at arm's length. It's kept at bay. So the characters can... It's like stepping into the past. The Amish romances that I've read, I think I've read probably 10 of them, which is a drop in the bucket compared to a lot of romance readers on BookTube and off BookTube, but still, it's enough for me to draw a sort of a testing ground. And in the 10 or so Amish romances that I have read, the authors never create any tension between the modern world and the Amish world. That seems too easy for them. Usually the tensions are inside the Amish world. But we shall see. Okay, this next one is a location romance. That is also a popular gimmick in romance novels, is make a location and then set your whole series of romances in that location, where the location is doing a lot of the heavy lifting for the romance aspect. Is it a scenic valley in Pennsylvania? Is it a scenic mountain resort in Colorado? Or is it, in this case, a place rather ominously called Manatee Bay? take my word for it. A place called Manatee Bay is not going to have any long-lasting romance. I'm guessing it will probably lead to one messy divorce after another, several of them involving Frank Sinatra. Your mileage may vary. Also, of course, for Autumn Amour, I will be reading my beloved Regency romances. Regency romances are my favorite kind of romance, and I know that that seems a little odd. I just said that the real world of the Amish is not romantic. There's nothing romantic about it. You have to make it a fantasy version in order to set a romance in it. And you might be, thinking, well, sure, those of you who are historically inclined will know that that was certainly true of the Regency period, when King George III was in recusal and the Prince Regent, his son, was in charge of England. It was not a romantic period. It was gross. It was filthy. It was disgusting, hypocritical. It was full of climbers and horrible people. And yet, it has become one of the most popular settings for romance novels. No way to fight with that any more than you can fight with it when it comes to Amish settings. But I love Regency romances. I'm not that big a fan of Regency romances being written today. I like them. A lot of those authors are friends, but a Regency romance that where the characters are tearing each other's clothes off in Chapter 3 seems to me to be indulging in a lot of laziness. But the old-fashioned Regency romances, where it's all Jane Austen wordplay and the consummation devoutly to be wished for happens only after the last page, I have a ton of those Regencies, and I love them. But a lot of the modern versions of those, where the author is strictly adhering to that pattern, they seem forced. A lot of the modern iteration of those traditional Regencies don't seem alive. Hate to say it. The life has passed on to the more racy romances, even the ones set in the Regency. But I still read some of those, and one of them is coming out here. I read the first book in this series. This is called Millstone of Doubt by Erica Vetch, and is a Thorndike and Swan Regency romance. I can't imagine why I was drawn to the cover, although when it comes to the cover, allow me to point out, if you are ever in the Regency period and you have a little gun, don't hold it like that. Especially don't point it in that direction. These things have a tendency to explode. If things were to go wrong with the young man on this cover, we would be dealing with a very different Regency romance than I suspect this is going to be. So don't do it. But anyway, hold it away from the body and in the other direction. Then this next one, again, it's a location romance. It's contemporary. I don't know those as well as I could. I could do with a lot of reading of them. This is by Kelly Elliott, who is her subscription is that she is a New York Times bestselling author. I could swear I have read her. That name rings a bell. This is called Part of Me. It's a Seaside Chronicles romance. It's got a photo for the cover, no artwork, no cover artwork at all. I have often enjoyed this kind of book. They can do things wrong. They can rely too much on slang, too much on Twitter idioms, too much profanity. I'm no prude, but people in real life don't tend to talk with the amount of profanity that characters in profanity-inclined romances tend to use. And also, another thing that tends to crop up in contemporary romances that tends not to come up in historical romances of any kind, not just Regency, but anywhere, is characters making just incredibly, ridiculously bad decisions. Decisions that they would not make. I guess people do that in real life, but we'll have to see. I don't think I know this series at all. So we'll give it a try. And this next one is supernatural romance, because again, romance can cover anything. This is by Nasri Noor. Now, I don't think I know that name at all. I'm pretty sure I have not read this author. And this is the first book in a series called Wild Hearts, in which a young sorcerer captures a fae, a supernatural sylph of some kind. But what started out as a supernatural power play becomes something more. They start to feel something for each other. Hubba hubba. Prince of Flowers. So we shall see just how much fertilizer he can take. I'm up for it anyway. It's the first book in a series, which I just love. And this next one is not the first book. It's the second book in a series. I read the first book. It's a hockey romance. Again, like with the Amish, and maybe with the Regency period, a weird thing. Also Highlanders, for that matter. I've met Highlanders. There's nothing romantic about them. Bull riders try the same thing. They put their teeth in a jar at night. But, another subgenre of romance that is bizarrely popular is hockey. Hockey players who also put their teeth in a jar at night. Hockey players somehow have become the real fireplugs of the romance world. And this book by Elise Faber, it's part of a series. The first book in the series was called Big Puck Energy. And the second one is called Filthy Puck Boy. You can see it's a hockey romance. We shall see. Big Puck Energy made me chuckle several times. It didn't actually make me care about its characters, which is a big deal. That's a big drawback, even in a book that's obviously written for fun. I want to care about your characters. If you don't make me do that, I'm going to be a little bit ambivalent about your book. We'll see. I'm perfectly willing to download this and give the author another try to see if maybe this will feel a little better. Okay, we'll move from hockey romance to hockey romance. What can I say? There are probably more hockey romances coming out in the month of September alone than I will realistically read. I'm not going to read more than 2 or 3 of these things in a month. But this one is by E.M. Lindsay. I don't think I know that author. This is called Soft Hands, and it is a Sin Bin West Coast novel. I believe it's a hockey novel. And there is my boy Eric on the cover. If you're looking at those forearms and you're thinking, boy, those are hairy forearms, you should see him if he were to turn around and face you on this cover. Looks like a little Sasquatch. But very popular cover model, and ascending in the ranks. Who knows if he may be the Paul Marin of a new generation? and as any self-respecting son of Boston will have it, it's not any other. It's not polo that he's playing in this novel. It's hockey. So we shall see. I may not know this author at all. This next one is the first book in the series called Tentacular Tales. And it is also a sub-subgenre of romance. One of the weird sub-subgenres of romance is tentacle romance, sometimes known as tentacle porn. And again, like with the Omegaverse, we're going to have a talk. I don't know. I have not fully plumbed what is going on, what the allure is of tentacle romance. I have not quite figured that out. Maybe just because I haven't read enough of it. Although, I read a novel called Accidentally in Love that was tentacle romance and had a dumb pun in the title, and yet was a pretty good book. I did enjoy it. It was well done. And that sort of was my gateway drug to tentacle romance. I will now read tentacle romance on the chance, because as luck would have it, the first piece of tentacle romance that I read, Accidentally in Love, was actually good. A well-thought-out world. Good world building, good characters. The author remembered to pause for emotional resonance now and again. I don't care. Well, I do care how Freudian the love stuff is. If the rest of that stuff is in place, then I'm on board. And this is by Chloe Archer. And I believe the title is a pun on a Tom Jones song lyric. It's called "It's Not Unusual to Be Loved by an Alien." It's not just any alien. You've got Las Vegas in the background, sort of essential for tentacle romance. But it's not just any alien, because there are tentacles all over the place here. So this is definitely, Tentacular Tales is the name of the thing. This is definitely going to be tentacle romance. I'm on board for that. And then this next one I wanted to repeat again. I've mentioned this a couple of times on this channel. This is by J.R. Ward. This is the Black Dagger Brotherhood Prison Camp, a spin-off series of her long-running Black Dagger Brotherhood books. And I just wanted to throw The Viper up on the screen once again. Can't imagine why, but I am looking forward to this, as I have every J.R. Ward book. No reason why I would look for this one in particular. These are supernatural bad boy romance novels that of a type that she and Lindsay Sands write them in regular series, and they are quite good, quite enjoyable. Lots and lots of background to them. There is no possible way I don't think that you would know a hawk from a handsaw when it came to anything that was going on in the Viper if you hadn't read at least the other prison camp books, but probably Black Dagger Brotherhood books to begin with as well. But I'm going to enjoy it. I'm heavily invested in that world, in the world of the Black Dagger Brotherhood. And there you go. That is admittedly a self-indulgently long potential partial TBR for Autumn Amour. I will leave a link to all the relevant videos down below. I will leave, if I remember, I will leave a list of the weekly prompts down below so that if you want to join in and finally dip your toe in the world of romance, you'll be well guided. You'll be in very good company. A lot of the co-hosts for Autumn Amour have read a lot of romances. And you already know that I think that Sarah at the Bookish Knitter is the romance booktuber. so we'll have a lot. I'm hoping we'll have a lot of interesting videos and maybe even some discussions. Discussion videos would be nice. But anyway, those are some of the books that I'm looking forward to. And I'd love to hear your plans if you're joining us for August or more. What are you going to read? But I'm going to wrap this up for now. This is going on way too long, and I will be back. Thank you, BookTube.